Hello and welcome to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett, and we are going to pick up where we left off on the last episode, continuing a conversation with my very good friend, Martin Rutte. And for those of you that weren't with us in the last episode, I'm literally going to invite you to go back and listen to that because it sets up perfectly something that we're going to be talking about in this episode, which is Project Heaven on Earth. But before we get to that, just a brief introduction on the soul of business. This podcast is organized around a very basic premise. Business is the most pervasive and the most influential force on the planet today. There is literally nothing on this planet that escapes the touch of business's activities. And as a consequence of that, it's my bias that businesses, not just okay, can you hear that? Yeah.
I can, yeah. It is distracting.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett, and today's guest is someone we had on the show in the last episode, Martin Rutte, very good friend of mine. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm having him back again in just a moment. But first, just a brief introduction to this podcast, Why the Soul of Business. It's my bias that, and it's actually my observation as well, that business is the most pervasive force on the planet today. I mean, there is literally nothing on this planet that escapes the touch of business's activities. You know, I can be an oyster in the middle of the South Pacific, and my shell is going to be deteriorating because there's so much CO2 in the water. Direct consequence of business's activities. The result of this is that, from my perspective, business has a moral obligation to act as a steward of life on this planet, simply because nothing is escaping its touch. The implication for me, and this is where the soul of business conversation comes in, is that everything is connected. And when businesses begin approaching what they do from the perspective that everything is connected, they start making decisions in a different way. And this is one of the ways that the soul of business begins to be accessed and leveraged for the greater good of all. It's my contention that the purpose of business is not to make a profit. Making a profit is useful, obviously, but it's also necessary if you're going to stay in business. But the purpose of business is to uplift the experience of being alive on this planet, to uplift the quality of living on this planet. And if business is doing that well with their products and services, you're going to be making some money. You're going to be making a profit, and you'll be viable. Part of the way that begins to happen is that we begin to find ways to allow the spirit that was originally with the organization's founding to emerge. That's where aliveness begins. That's where imagination begins to appear. And that's where new ideas and creativity and innovation begins to be sourced. You can't impose innovation. You can allow it to emerge, and it emerges when spirit is accessed, when the soul of business is allowed to flourish. So I welcome you again to the Soul of Business podcast, and I'm specifically excited to welcome our guest, Martin Rutte. In our last episode, Martin and I had a fascinating conversation around the spirit in the workplace, and I invited Martin to speak a bit about his gestation, I guess would be one way to think about it. How did he come to begin even approaching spirit in the workplace? And he literally is probably the person that started the inquiry into spirit in the workplace back in the 1980s. And in our last session together, he talked about that and how it actually has informed a lot of what he's doing today. Just a real quick summary of where he's come from, just as part of his CV or his resume. He is the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul at Work, which has been translated into 20 languages with sales over 1.1 million copies around the world. He was the first Canadian to address the Corporate Leadership and Ethics Forum, of the Harvard Business School, and he's been back 4 consecutive years as the keynote speaker to that prestigious forum. He's also the co-founder and past chair of the board of the Center for Spirituality in the Workplace. His pioneering work on spirituality in the workplace was featured in an address he gave to the World Bank, which was shown in part on ABC TV special, Creativity, Touching the Divine. The current work that he's doing is organized around and centered around something that he's calling Project Heaven on Earth. And that's what I want us to talk about today. And I think, again, you're going to be fascinated by not only the depth of Martin's expertise, but also the breadth of what he's attempting to accomplish with Project Heaven on Earth. So my good friend, Martin Rutte, welcome.
Thank you, Blaine. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. It's a delight to be with you.
It's a delight to have you here again. So Project Heaven on Earth, talk to me a little bit about, we came from spirituality in the workplace.
Yep.
How did this move into what you're now calling Project Heaven on Earth?
Well, if your listeners have listened to the previous interview, excuse me, you'll know that I helped begin the whole inquiry into spirituality and work, and was in that for a good 20, 25 years. And then about 25, 30 years ago, I was doing a keynote address here in Santa Fe at a conference organized by a good friend, Jim Barry, on spirituality and work. Yeah, I remembered his name. And I was in the green room getting ready to go in to speak. And this thought popped into my mind. If every business in the world is spiritual, is that what you want? Because I'd been working on that for such a long time. And I said, no, if we can transform business, because business is the temporal power in the world today, if we can transform business, we can transform the world. And then this thought popped in my head, oh, you mean heaven on earth? And my first reaction, Blaine, I won't use the swear words, but was like, what? You can't say that. You can't say heaven on earth. I mean, whoa.
Well, that kind of goes back to you can't just say spirituality in the workplace, 25 years ago, 30 years ago.
I had the same thought, exactly the same thought. So what happened was I said, well, I couldn't talk about spirituality and work 25 years ago. Why can't I talk about heaven on earth? Because I can clearly speak to you about hell on earth and all the hells on earth that are going on in the world. Why can't we talk about heaven on earth? Why can't we talk about the yearning, the longing that people have for the kind of life and work and world that they want? And so that began this inquiry into, so what's heaven on earth? How do we make this happen? Is it possible? Is it not? And because I had no preconceived notion of what it meant. So I just went around to people saying, what's heaven on earth for you? What's heaven on earth for you? I wasn't trying to impose any answer. I didn't have an answer. I was really doing my research, my field research, as it were. What's heaven on earth for you? And I began to see some patterns. I began to see, how can we distill this inquiry in a very powerful way? And so what I discovered is 3 questions, which I would like to ask you, and I'd like to ask the viewers and listeners, please, when I ask the question, pause, answer the question for yourself, and then come back, because it'll make a much more powerful experience. So, Blaine.
Yes.
I've already asked you this permission to do this. Recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on? Recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on?
Okay. Do you want to describe what I was doing or where I was at?
However you want to talk about it.
I was standing in a trout stream in southwestern Oregon, and I could feel the water pushing against my legs and in my waders. The air and it smelled of pine scent. I could hear birds chirping. It was fairly early in the morning. There was this transitional time between the sun just coming up and warming the air and still this little bite of coldness from the morning. I could hear the rippling. There was no traffic sound. I mean, there was literally no sound but nature around me. And I hadn't even cast my line yet. I was fly fishing in the stream, but just standing there, it was such a sublime experience. I felt connected to everything. My senses were really heightened. I was hearing things. I was smelling things. I was very conscious of And I hadn't noticed this in quite this way before. The force of the water moving against my legs as I just stood there. And it wasn't a big push. It was kind of a gentle flow because it wasn't a fast moving river. But that's, when you ask that question, that is literally one of the first things that popped into my mind.
Good. Second question. Imagine you have a magic wand, and with this wand, you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth for you? So again, imagine you have a magic wand, and with it, you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth for you?
Okay. As I wave this wand, it's an experience of connection. It's an experience of honoring. Mostly, it's an experience of being awake, not asleep at the wheel, but awake. I notice what I'm noticing. I notice what's around me. I am struck by beauty everywhere I turn, even in the smallest things that may look curmudgeonly. If I could use that word, there's beauty in it. There's the Sanskrit word called rasa, the thisness of something. Latin also is hyacity. The thisness of something. Spirit is evoked. Spirit moves through the smallest thing. It imbues everything with life. And heaven on earth is, I'm appreciating that. I'm aware that everything has that spirit, and it's not spirit that's unique to it. It's spirit that is of everything. And this is an expression of that spirit in a very specific way. And I'm awake enough to appreciate that. And I'm encountering, others, and this is, it's a relationship. And so I'm encountering others that are having that same experience with what they're, observing and smelling and tasting and working with in their lives. It's an honor. Mostly it's an honor.
Very clear. Thank you. And then the third question, what simple, easy, concrete step will you take in the next 24 hours to move that forward?
That's a great question. It really is. Simple, concrete, pragmatic step. I'll hug my wife.
Good.
I'll rub my dog's ears. I'll actually, when we're finished with this interview, I'm going to get up and go work out because I want to feel that sense of life moving through me. And I think I'll also just, I'm here on the West Coast. I'm going to watch a sunset tonight because the sky is clear enough that I can do that, and it's not raining. So I think I'll just go watch a sunset and relish the sunset.
Wonderful. Now let's look at each question in more detail. So question one, recall a time when you experienced heaven on earth. What was going on? What you did was very beautifully talk about being in that trout stream. I was there with you. I could feel the water against your boot. That's question one. What you did not do, Blaine, is you did not say to me, Martin, what do you mean by heaven on earth? Blaine, no one asks that question. People do what you did, which is they answer the question. So my contention is the only way you could answer the question is you must have what I call an already knowing within you about what that is. And you go, boom, Oregon, trout fishing. Second question, here's a magic wand. The reason for the magic wand is it removes the necessity of having to know how you're going to do it. And if you don't have to know how, you can go purely and powerfully into the what. And you did. And I wrote down some of the things you said. Connection, honoring, being awake, rasa, struck by beauty, appreciation, aware of not only myself, but others as well. So what I find when I'm doing seminars and workshops, people know what heaven on earth is. They just know. I thought I'd have to come in with like a jackhammer to know. It's very simple. And then the third question, what will you do about it? And the third question has two components. You'll either do something new that you've never done before, or you'll do something that you've done before, but it will be with a new context of, this is my contribution to heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Hug my wife, rub my dog's ears, look at the sunset. So what those questions uh, do is to say to people, you have had an experience of heaven on earth. You know already what it is. And in a much deeper sense, you do know what heaven on earth is. If I gave you everything on that list right now, would you take it? Of course you would.
Absolutely.
Everybody, yeah. So I want to make that conversation about what heaven on earth is for you. I want to bring it from background to foreground so that I can come up to you one day and say, suppose we've never met before. Blade, hi, I'm Martin Rutte, hi, I'm Blaine Bartlett, blah, blah, blah. What do you do? And what are you doing for heaven on earth? And you would tell me. And you would ask me and I would tell you. So it would become normal conversation. And then the third thing is, what simple thing will you do so that it moves forward? And so that's the premise. You said something before, so I have a little plug for the book. Can you read the title of the book, please?
Project Heaven on Earth.
There's another title embedded in the same title. Project Heaven on Earth.
Project Heaven on Earth. Yes. Yep.
So it's both a state of being and a state of doing. That's what this book and this work is about. So let me stop there, because what I've discovered by asking those questions over and over and over, hundreds of times, is there are 7 major gateways of answers that people give, 7 major gateways into heaven on earth. But let me just stop there and see if you have a question.
Well, and I want to touch on those major gateways in just a moment, but I have an observation, not quite a question. When I started playing around with the notion of tapping into the soul of business, and more specifically, approaching business from a compassionate perspective, compassionate capitalism, one of the major objections I got was, well, the human condition doesn't allow for that. And I'm going, well, that's an interesting thing. And as I explored it and I really started playing with it, and this was not a big epiphany, but it was one that was seminal in one sense, because it occurred to me that the human condition is a learned condition.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be that way. And to the point of your 3 questions, all of us have the experience of what it means, or what it's like to have the soul, the spirit, come out and live, both at work, but also at home, in my life. I know what heaven on earth is. I know what spirit alive on earth is. And it's not the human condition. If I can learn to put a lid on it, I can learn to take the lid off.
Brilliant.
And that's the observation here. So,
I would add to that, in my way of saying it, the same thing, which is, we think that the story of being a human and being humanity is called not heaven on earth. This is not heaven on earth, and it can never be. Yes, we have some lovely meals and some experiences of heaven on earth, but ultimately, no, it can't be. That is learned as well. Mm-hmm. So how do we start this new story? 10 or 15 years ago, Blaine, you heard a lot of people saying, the current story is not working. We need a new story. We need a new story. But then you stopped hearing that. And my suggestion is, the reason you stopped hearing that is because nobody named the new story.
Yes.
So I'm saying we are naming the new story, if you choose, and it's called We Are Experiencing and Co-Creating Heaven on Earth. How do you start a new story? It's like, how do you start a new business? How do you start a new relationship? By declaration, by saying, people said to me, but how could you start this? Who are you? And I said, well, because I saw the current situation. I didn't like a lot of it. And I said, we need a new story. What could that new story be? We're experiencing and co-creating heaven on earth. I say, that's the name of the new story. And then I began. So part of this is the realization that you can create a new story, that we can create a new story, and that the way to do that is by giving a declaration, by saying so, by using the authority of your word to create this new story.
The power of declaration is not to be underestimated in any way, shape, or form.
No.
John Kennedy, and I'll be cliche here, but by the end of the decade, we will be on the moon. That declaration changed the nature of human exploration in a lot of ways, changed what we as human beings thought was possible.
Yes. So declaration changes what we believe is possible.
It does. Leadership is the art of expressing possibility in a way that people can begin to see it as becoming a probability.
And then a reality.
And then a reality.
That's
So
exactly what's going on with heaven on earth. It's impossible. Oh, it's possible?
possible.
It's a potential. And by just taking one little step, I may, and then there are other people all around the world who are already, and then they're
we
in.
don't look at current reality to make a decision about what the future would look like. And again, that's what passes as the human condition today is people will look at current reality and go, well, that's just what we've got. And I can't see it being much better. So we get iterations of the current state.
Yes.
And I believe fully that I can make a declaration about an ideal state. My blog, Ideals in Motion, is about that. This podcast is about that. Ideals in Motion, the soul of business, accessing life, doesn't have to be held captive to what has been. And the idea of, we can live on heaven on earth. We already do. We're just not experiencing it as such.
Let me go in there because that's very, very important. There's the fundamental belief is that heaven is a place that exists up there after death. Fine. But what about here? Where does it say that this also can't be heaven on earth? Heaven here on earth. It doesn't say that. Mm-hmm. It does not say that. Even in the Bible, in my book, I do a whole chapter on the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, that basic notion, that basic tenet. But it's not accurate that we can't go back in neither Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Not accurate. That's mind-boggling, I know, but it's actually accurate.
No, it's not because the premise is, in order to go back in, we have to have left it. It never left us. It never left us. We just left it.
Yeah, that's true.
So my reality is an expression of an inner dialogue. And if I begin to change my inner dialogue, I begin to change what I experience as an external reality. And that, I think, is where some of the 7 major questions that you referenced start to move us, is we begin, questions change dialogue. Questions serve 2 purposes as far as I can tell. They actually provide information. I ask a question because I want some information. But they also point a direction, because I have to go in a certain direction to get the answer to a question. So I'm curious, what are the 7 major questions that you've come up with?
7 major gateways.
Gateways, yes. What are the 7 major gateways? What are the questions that move me into those gateways?
The 3 questions I asked you move you into the gateways. Okay. The 7 gateways that I discovered are, first, inner. There are people who say the way you create heaven on earth is by creating in here. The more in here, the more out there. So therapy, workshops, art, all the things we do to create more expression of our heaven on earthliness or clean up the garbage in the way. A second, living a global value. We all know people for whom love or harmony. My wife's is joy. Excuse me. My wife's is joy. That's what she's about in life. A third is relationships with yourself, with another, with God, the divine. Then there are people who say, well, what about the external world? Yes, your wife, Cynthia, would be very much the gateway of external world. End a suffering, hunger, poverty, war. That's a major gateway. Have an institution. What if the purpose of institutions, and you're into business for sure, but what if the institutions, business, religion, law, government, what if their purpose was to help co-create heaven on earth? What would they do? Another gateway is nations. What if my nation were a heaven on earth nation? There are people who are doing this now, by the way. And then the last one is, and you referenced it earlier, this here now is heaven on earth. The realization, the belief that it isn't is what prevents us from experiencing it.
Yeah.
So my book goes into each of those 7 in detail and how you can open them up so that you end up with your own heaven on earth project. That's where I want you to end up. So let me talk about some of the projects. And there's a common theme that I discovered about 2 or 3 months ago that just was like blaringly obvious until I saw it. A woman put her definition of heaven on earth at the end of every email she sends out. Simple. A police officer, who you know, and I know, Justin, wrote a 16-page manual called Heaven on Earth for Law Enforcement. A real estate agency in Canada wants to end homelessness, and they've created a program called A Home for Everyone, whereby each agent has agreed to contribute $100 off each commission check. They've raised over $200,000, and they give that away every year to groups or individuals who are promising a home for everyone. And we go all the way up to a woman in Austria, Elizabeth. I was doing a webinar one day, and she said, my project is Austria is a heaven on earth nation. And I went, what? Why would you say something like that? And she said, well, because it's simple.
Simple.
So what I discovered, Blaine, is that each of those people had discovered their simple. So my new question to people is, what's your simple? Because when you discover what your simple is, you will move. You will be part of co-creating heaven on earth. On my website, projectheavenonearth.com, there's information on the book. You can sign up for a course, and there's a tab called Stories. I have 63 examples from all over the world, many of them, the majority of them, with links so you can see. And the one I'm really proud of is my wife and I spend the summers in Prince Edward Island, Canada, which is a province. It's the smallest one. It's the birthplace of Canada, so it has a very important role in the psyche of the country. And we declared, a group of us about 10 years ago, Prince Edward Island is Canada's first heaven on earth province. We have a coffee shop that has created a heaven on earth coffee blend. A tea merchant has created a heaven on earth tea blend. A jewelry shop owner, she owns 2 stores in town. She gives away my 3 little questions with every purchase. She's given away almost 10,000. The Kiwanis Club has a new award called the Heaven on Earth Leadership Award, open to any student on the island, public or high school, who has done a project which for them is heaven on earth. And then last summer, in launching the book, I interviewed each of the 4 political party leaders in the province about what heaven on earth is for them, the world, the province, and what they're going to do about it in the next 24 hours. So I want to tell you that this is much more than just a good idea.
Yeah.
It is moving globally.
That's why I wanted to have you on. It is moving globally. And when you first brought this to my attention a number of years ago, I was just kind of like, wow, that's a big deal. Heaven on earth. How do you make that granular? How do you bring it? And it is acting locally to have an impact globally.
Cool.
Yeah. Not to be cliche here, but that's literally what it is. And one of the ways that I kind of organize my thinking a lot of times around possibilities is that it's already happened. I just haven't arrived yet. So, yeah. So heaven on earth already does exist. We just haven't arrived yet. And we will know arrival when everybody begins behaving as if, thinking as if, smelling as if, and acting as if it's already here. And it's not hard to do.
One person at a time, one story at a time, one contribution.
One action at a time.
Excuse my throat. If you put in the phrase heaven on earth into Google, heaven on earth 2017, you'll get about 155 million results. Not just for me, but from that phrase. If you then put it in heaven on earth 2018, you'll get about 212 million. If you put in heaven on earth 2019, you'll get about 169 million. We are about 89% of the entirety of last year. And where are we now? Roughly the beginning of March, 2 months into the year. And we're over 80% of the entirety of last year. So something clearly is going on. This meme, this thought form, it's coming in.
There is momentum building. It's already here. We just haven't arrived. And it looks like we can see it on the horizon.
Very clearly.
Yeah, that's exciting. And for me, I mean, the idea of heaven on earth in a business is where soul gets to thrive.
Well, let me tell you how that's been engaged with. Excuse me, I'm going to put you on mute for 1 second.
Yeah.
There's a consultant in Sweden who works on courage, on having people and companies, corporations take on courageous acts. She was looking for something next and she didn't know what it was. she took my 3 questions and we talked about it. And she's added question 2A, which is, here's a magic wand. And with it, you can have heaven on earth. What's heaven on earth for your business? Which I thought was a brilliant, brilliant question in terms of why can't your business, and it can, contribute to heaven on earth?
Yeah.
So ask the question, what's heaven on earth for my business, and how do I begin making that real in the world?
And on that particular question, I'm going to begin to bring this episode to a close. Heaven on earth, it does exist. It does exist, not just as a concept. There are pockets of it everywhere. And for those of you listening, it can be, and one of those pockets can be your business. And the soul of your business begins to thrive. The soul of your business begins to emerge in a way that is generative, that allows for people to feel connected and alive. You're going to be cooking with gas, to be colloquial here. It's, you start having some very interesting things happen. So I want to thank Martin Rutte, my guest, both in the last episode, but also in this one. How can we get more information on this project, Heaven on Earth?
2 ways. This book, Project Heaven on Earth, is available on Amazon globally. And you can sign up for a free course and a weekly blog, also free, and see the stories and the old blogs and tons of stuff on my website, projectheavenonearth.com. Project Heaven on Earth, all one word, .com.
Great.
And let me know. Write me. My address is on the website. Let me know what you're doing to bring heaven on earth into the world.
Perfect. I love it. And I want to thank, again, Martin Rutte for being my guest. This is Blaine Bartlett, The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. You can get more information about the Soul of Business by going to my website at blainebartlett.com or my company website at avatar-resources.com. And there's also a blog that has a number of different posts around this particular topic called Ideals in Motion, one word, idealsinmotion.com. And until next time, this is Blaine Bartlett. Enjoy the rest of your day and continue to have the soul and the spirit move what you do. Take care. Bye.